What if the wound wasn't a mistake, but a decision? What if the pain you carry didn't come from a slip of the tongue or a momentary lapse in judgment, but from someone who knew exactly what they were doing? One of the most dangerous lies we whisper to ourselves is this: they didn't mean it. It's the excuse we reach for when the ache feels too sharp, when facing the truth might shatter the image we've held onto. But deep down, beyond the layers of denial, you already know. There's a vast difference between someone making a mistake and someone making a move. They didn't just accidentally bruise your heart. They didn't stumble into your life and happen to break something. No, they walked in with eyes wide open, with words sharpened like weapons, and when the moment came, they used them with intention. They aimed. And that's the truth that shakes you to your core. Not just that the pain happened, but who it came from. Not a stranger, not a distant acquaintance, but someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you might have defended 1,000 times, someone you prayed for more than you prayed for yourself. That's what makes the knife twist deeper. Because sometimes the enemy doesn't come to your door as a threat. He comes as a friend, as family, as love. He wears the face of someone you once believed would never hurt you. And when the betrayal comes, it doesn't roar, it whispers, it arrives cloaked in confusion. Did I do something wrong? Maybe I misunderstood. But you didn't. You saw it. You just didn't want to believe it. You wanted to believe they were still who they used to be, that the love you gave mattered, that your loyalty protected you. But history isn't immunity, and time doesn't transform everyone. Some people don't heal. They just become more skilled at hiding their true nature. And when their mask slips, when you finally catch a glimpse of the truth, you must not cover it with compassion. You must not excuse their actions with your empathy, because that ache in your chest, that silence you drowned in after they left, that storm they stirred in your spirit, those were real. They saw how they hurt you, and they didn't flinch. They didn't reach out, they didn't rush to make it right. And if they said sorry at all, it wasn't to soothe your soul. It was to soothe their control. Don't mistake manipulation for remorse. Don't let your gentle heart blind you to the sharpness of their intent. Some people study you, not to understand you, but to use what they know against you. They observe your kindness, your patterns, your deepest fears, and when the time is right, they strike, with calculation, with silence, with carefully chosen words. And still, you called it love. But let me be clear, real love never aims to destroy. Real love protects. Real love shields. Real love may challenge you, but it never wounds you just to prove a point. And so here you are, standing in the aftermath, not just of betrayal, but of awakening. You've seen the truth now. You can't unsee it. And no matter how much it hurts, the clarity is your freedom. Real love never twists the knife, especially when you're already on your knees. And yet, how often do we swing the door wide open again for the very people God rescued us from? How often do we silence the alarm bells in our spirit with excuses like, maybe they were just struggling, maybe it wasn't intentional? We drape their wounds in grace, but forget that grace without wisdom becomes bondage. Let's be clear. Forgiveness is a command, but foolishness is a choice. God never told you to hand your heart back to the one who shattered it. He told you to guard your heart. He told you to protect it like the treasure it is. He told you to walk in truth. And the truth is this: if they hurt you once on purpose, they'll do it again. Stop letting pain hide behind the mask of loyalty. Stop mistaking endurance for love. Stop measuring how deeply someone loves you by how much hurt you can tolerate. True love doesn't leave you broken and then blame you for bleeding. You deserve relationships that honor you, that see you, that protect your peace, not drain it. I know it's not easy. I know letting go can feel like losing a part of yourself, but hear this. You're not losing, you're learning. You're not walking away from love, you're walking away from a lie. You're clearing the way for what God really has for you, and sometimes the only way to receive what is right is to release what is wrong, even when it feels familiar. Don't dilute your pain just to keep someone close. Don't shrink your truth because you're afraid of being alone. God doesn't ask you to lie to yourself in order to love someone else. If someone damages you intentionally, that's not love. It's manipulation, it's control, it's deception, and it wears the mask of affection. But masks always fall, and when they do, it's not your job to cover them. It's your moment to see clearly. Not so you can shame them, not so you can take revenge, but so you can finally set yourself free. Because forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about releasing the poison. It's laying down the weight that bitterness wrapped around your soul. It's breaking the invisible chain that has kept you emotionally shackled to your pain. But let me say this as plainly as possible. Forgiveness is not access. Just because you forgive someone doesn't mean they get to re-enter the sacred space of your peace. You can forgive without reopening the door. You can bless them in your prayers without binding them to your future. We've been taught so much about forgiving that we've forgotten about protecting. We confuse grace with gullibility. We think real forgiveness means pretending nothing happened, offering the same trust, the same vulnerability, the same open door they once kicked down. But that's not forgiveness. That's forgetfulness, and God never called you to be forgetful. He called you to be wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove. He never said, let the wolf back in the fold just because you prayed for him. There are people you've forgiven in your heart, but they are not meant to walk with you into your future. They were part of the wilderness, not your promised land. So stop picking up hands that once pushed you down. Stop exhausting your soul, trying to love people into change. Because sometimes God's greatest gift is distance, sometimes separation is the protection. And when you override that, when you keep giving access to the very people God's trying to remove, you're not walking in forgiveness anymore. You're walking in disobedience. True forgiveness says, I release you from my anger. But it also says, I refuse to give you the power to steal my peace again. Because that peace wasn't free. You wept for that peace. You begged God for it on nights when no one saw your tears. And now that it's here, guard it. Don't hand it away to anyone who hasn't earned the right to be near it. And so we continue, because peace is never cheap. You didn't stumble into it. You fought for that peace. You clawed your way out of the shadows, dragged yourself through heartbreak and betrayal, stood back up when your knees were shaking just to find that stillness again. So why would you hand it back to the same hands that shattered it? Letting someone return just because you forgave them is like handing a thief the keys to your house simply because you prayed about the last robbery. That's not healing. That's self-sabotage. Here's the truth. Some people aren't sorry for what they did. They're just sorry they lost access to you. They don't miss you because they love you. They miss you because you were easy to use. You were the safe place, the soft answer, the open door. You were always kind, always present, always forgiving, and they counted on that. They mistook your grace for weakness. They confused your patience with permission. But now that you've found your strength, now that your eyes are clear and your heart is guarded, they want back in. Not to love you right, but to reset the cycle, to start it all over again. That's why you must learn the sacred art of forgiving with boundaries. You can still love them from afar. You can still pray for their healing. You can still carry warmth in your heart without carrying their weight in your life. God isn't evaluating your compassion by how close you let someone get again. He's watching the boundaries you keep. Because true healing comes with discernment. When people say, "Didn't you forgive them?" you can answer, "Yes, I forgave them, but I've also learned who not to trust again." That's not bitterness. That's clarity. That's not revenge. That's wisdom. The same God who said forgive also said guard your heart. And you can't guard what you keep giving away to people who only know how to break it. The world will try to convince you that forgiveness equals reunion, that love means giving people unlimited chances. But the spirit inside you knows better. Forgiveness is between you and God. Access is between you and discernment. So if God closes a door, don't you dare prop it open out of guilt. He knows what you don't. He heard the whispers behind your back. He saw the intentions they never said out loud. He witnessed the harm they plotted behind polite smiles. And sometimes his protection comes dressed as isolation. Sometimes his mercy feels like loneliness. But trust me, it's deliverance. In disguise, you don't owe anyone a front row seat in your life just because you forgave them. That's not pride. It's preservation. It's honor. It's respect for the healing God has done in you. So yes, bless them. Yes, release them. Yes, pray for them. But stop giving platform to people who clapped when you fell. Stop re-inviting pain into places God has already healed. Stop handing the pen to the very hands that tried to erase your story. Because let's be honest, it wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't just a heated moment or a lapse in judgment. It was intentional. They studied you. They learned your rhythms. They watched what made you shine and what made you shrink. They memorized the sound of your trust and used it as a weapon, and when they struck, they knew exactly how deep it would cut. That's what makes it hurt so much. It wasn't just betrayal, it was premeditated. They knew your wounds, they knew your scars, they knew how fragile you were in that moment, and they chose to weaponize it all against you. That's not immaturity. That's intention, and it's time to stop sugarcoating the truth. It's okay to admit that. It's okay to call it what it was. Because clarity is the first step to freedom, and now that the mask has fallen, it's time to stop pretending you didn't see the truth. We've been conditioned, especially those with tender hearts, to make excuses for the pain others cause us. Even while we're bleeding, we minimize the damage, not because it's small, but because we're afraid of what it means if we face it head on. We whisper to ourselves, they didn't mean it, or maybe I overreacted, or they're just going through something. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. When someone wounds you using the very things you once trusted them with, that's not a misunderstanding. That's not weakness. That's a weapon. Some of you gave your loyalty to people who only wanted leverage. You entrusted your secrets to those who saw them as ammunition. You shared your most sacred dreams with those silently rooting for your failure. You thought they listened because they cared, but they were listening to strategize, not to support. They weren't leaning in to love your heart. They were leaning in to locate your cracks, to find where to strike for maximum damage. And let me tell you something. You are not foolish for trusting. You are not weak for loving deeply. You are not naive because you hoped the best in someone. That's not your shame to carry. That's their darkness, not your mistake. What they did reflects their character, not your value. Don't let someone else's betrayal redefine your identity. You were honest, you were sincere, you were pure in your love. And that's something to be proud of, not something to regret. Thank God you were still tender. Thank God your heart wasn't hardened before that moment. Thank God you still believed in the good. Yes, it got taken for granted. Yes, it got misused. But that doesn't mean you were wrong. It means they were. There are people who know exactly what they're doing. They bait you with kindness. They cover manipulation with flattery. They offer promises they never intended to keep. And then, once your guard is down and you've given them access, they strike. That's why it feels so confusing. Because some parts felt real, and maybe some parts were, but the betrayal, that was deliberate. It wasn't a mistake. It was calculated. And that's what makes it so hard to forget. It's not just the pain, it's the precision. But listen closely now. God saw it. Even when you didn't, he saw the envy behind their smile. He saw the strategy behind their compliments. He saw how they used your softness against you. And he allowed it to be exposed, not to shatter you, but to set you free, because sometimes the truth doesn't whisper, it wounds. Sometimes it takes heartbreak to open our eyes. Sometimes we only stop explaining away the red flags once they're on fire. You thought you were safe, but it was a setup. You thought they were protecting you, but they were preparing the strike. And, yes, it's not just wrong, it's evil. And yet you survived it, you walked through it, and now you see it for what it really was. You see them for who they really are. And more importantly, you see God's hand in it all. You see what He was pulling you away from. You see what He was rescuing you from. Because the enemy doesn't always come knocking with a warning. He sneaks in through the cracks of familiarity. He uses those who had your trust. Betrayal only works when it comes from inside the circle. But here's the miracle in it all. What was designed to destroy you failed. What was meant to leave you crushed awakened you. What should have broken your spirit, built a fire in your soul that refuses to be extinguished. Maybe they thought you'd never recover. Maybe they thought their silence would suffocate your worth. Maybe they expected you to keep waiting. Keep begging, keep replaying the past. But you didn't. You rose, you're still standing, and now you know better. So don't ignore what happened. Don't rewrite the truth to make it easier to digest. Because healing only happens when we stop sugarcoating betrayal and start calling it by name. Because when you finally open your eyes to the truth, you realize not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. If they studied your soul and still chose to strike, that's not someone who deserves another invitation. That's someone God allowed you to see clearly. That's someone whose actions have spoken louder than any apology ever could. Let the exposure be enough. Let the truth be loud enough to drown out the old excuses. Let it open your eyes, not your door. There comes a moment when the most spiritually mature thing you can do is walk away. Not out of hatred, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. The wisdom that says, I've tried, I've prayed, I've loved deeply, but now it's time to let go. You don't have to keep showing up to places where your soul is under siege. You don't have to stay loyal to spaces that never truly valued you. You don't have to sit quietly in environments where you're barely tolerated, let alone treasured. There is a quiet power in walking away that many people won't understand because they've never had the courage to do it themselves. But you're learning what it means to choose obedience over approval, peace over pretense, growth over guilt. The enemy would love nothing more than to trap you in cycles. Cycles of pain, of fake apologies followed by the same old betrayal. Of promises that sound poetic but mean nothing. He wants you to believe staying is the noble path. He wants you to think that keeping the peace, even if it costs you your soul, is what love is supposed to look like. But that's not love. Real love doesn't confuse you. It doesn't shatter your spirit. Real love is shelter. It is clarity. It's protection. And sometimes the most radical form of love is the love you show yourself when you finally say, no more. Some people knew your worth the whole time. They just hoped you wouldn't discover it. Because once you did, they knew their control would end. So they smiled in your face while draining your energy. They called you too sensitive when you tried to express your needs. They labeled you selfish for setting boundaries they never respected. But they never once acknowledged the silent battles they caused behind closed doors. And yet, you stayed. You stayed because you believed in them. You stayed because you thought loyalty could heal what honesty never reached. You stayed because you prayed that your love could redeem what was already lost. But now you've seen enough. Now you know that healing doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes healing happens when you let go, when you stop trying to prove your worth to those who never truly protected it. Walking away is not weakness. It is strength. It is spiritual clarity. It is the moment your soul finally says, I refuse to beg for crumbs at a table God never sat at. Yes, it hurts. You'll mourn the future you imagined. You'll feel the ache of what you gave and never got in return. But that grief, it's a cleansing one. It's not defeat, it's deliverance. And on the other side of that release is peace. Not conditional peace. Not peace that depends on someone else's mood, but peace that runs deep. Peace that lets you breathe without holding your breath. Peace that whispers, you're finally safe now. Some of you have been crying out to God for peace, and He's been answering. Not by wrapping you in comfort, but by unraveling what was never stable to begin with. He's been showing you the fruit. He's been shining light on what you didn't want to see. He's letting it fall apart, not to break you, but to awaken you. And when God says it's time, believe Him. And when God starts pulling you out of the pain, don't keep dragging the past back in. Every time you try to stitch together what God is tearing apart, you delay your healing. Every time you minimize the pain, excuse the betrayal, or pretend it didn't shake you to your core, you're not being strong. You're stalling your deliverance. Some of us are crying over people God already walked away from. We're clinging to what heaven has already closed the book on. And the more we plead for restoration in relationships where God has already removed His peace, the longer we stay stuck in places that were never meant to carry us into our future. Here's a truth that may sting, but will also set you free. Not every relationship is meant to be revived. Not every door that slams shut is meant to be reopened. Sometimes the blessing is hidden in the goodbye. Sometimes healing begins not with a new chapter, but with the courage to end the wrong one. And don't let guilt become the leash that pulls you back into the arms of what broke you. You don't owe your peace to those who once shattered it. You don't owe your healed self to those who helped wound the version of you that had to fight for survival. If they couldn't value your love when it was freely given, they don't deserve your presence now that you've learned how to protect it. Let them be surprised. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let your absence speak the truth your mouth no longer needs to explain. Because your peace, it's powerful. It's loud. And it will echo louder than any apology ever could. And trust this, the same God who stood by you when you were broken is now walking with you into something beautiful. You're not walking away empty. You're walking with wisdom, with purpose, with divine protection. You're not losing anything that was ever meant for you. You're stepping out of pain and into the promise God has been waiting to unfold. But don't confuse forgiveness with access. We often do that, especially when we're soft-hearted, full of hope, still yearning for peace. We think that to forgive means we must welcome them back in, that true healing demands a reunion. But that's not what forgiveness looks like when it's guided by discernment. Forgiveness means you lay down the weight of resentment. You stop rehearsing the pain. You stop craving revenge. You release it, not for them, but for you. But releasing doesn't mean reopening. Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. You can let go without letting them back in. You can move forward in freedom while still maintaining your boundaries, because some people don't return out of remorse. They return out of recognition. They recognize your glow. They sense your distance. They feel the shift in your spirit and suddenly want to circle back, not to nurture your growth, but to interrupt it. That's where you need to be firm. Forgiveness is free. Access is earned. God never asked you to be naive. He never said you must let the ones who burned your peace walk back in and light another match. You can love people from a distance. You can pray for them without partnering with them. You can wish them healing while guarding the gates of your life with divine wisdom. So choose freedom. Choose peace. And let the ones who once hurt you learn that grace is not permission. It's release. And as you keep stepping into healing, remember this: some people weren't just a part of your past. They were a divine warning for your future. God didn't allow the pain just to break your heart. He allowed it to sharpen your discernment. The lesson was never meant to become your lifestyle. It was meant to protect you from ever repeating the cycle. When you let people back into your life without repentance, without fruit, without evidence of change, what you're doing isn't grace, it's self-betrayal. Forgiveness says, I no longer hate you. Wisdom says, I no longer trust you. And both can live peacefully within the same healed soul. You can carry mercy in one hand and boundaries in the other. You can release the bitterness and still refuse to reopen doors that once became battlefields. Because grace isn't foolishness. And being Christ-like doesn't mean being careless with your peace. Some people know how to mimic repentance. They know the script. They've learned how to speak regret, how to produce tears, how to sound convincing, but they're not repenting, they're rehearsing, they're baiting you. They're hoping for a reaction, for a weak moment, for one crack in the door so they can return, not to restore, but to resume their old patterns. And that's why God tells us, be wise as serpents, gentle as doves. He's not asking you to harden your heart, but to guard it. He's not calling you to bitterness, but to discernment. There's a powerful balance between being loving and being cautious, between showing mercy and exercising wisdom. The enemy would love for you to confuse forgiveness with passivity. He wants you to think that if you truly forgave, you'd let them right back in. But the Holy Spirit leads you into a deeper truth, that forgiveness frees you. It doesn't give free rein to the ones who hurt you. You are not obligated to offer access simply because you release the offense. So when they return, talking softly, acting changed, you must look beyond the apology. Look for humility. Look for the fruit. Not just the words, but the works. Not just guilt, but growth. If that's not present, then love them, forgive them, but keep them outside the gates of your peace. This season is too sacred for manipulation. Your purpose is too important for repeated pain. What God is doing in you right now cannot survive. In the same toxic soil that once tried to choke the life out of your soul, if they knock on the same door they once slammed in your face, you don't have to answer. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't have to reopen what God already sealed shut. You can smile in grace, forgive in love, and still say with holy clarity, no, not this time. God is doing something new in me. And that's not cruelty. That's maturity. There is no shame in guarding your growth. There is no guilt in choosing peace over pain. If they had truly cared, they wouldn't have caused the damage. If they had truly respected you, they wouldn't be asking to re-enter the very space they once destroyed. Because here's the truth. Trying to drag old people into your new season is like trying to fit shattered glass into a new window. It might look familiar, but it's dangerous, and it will collapse under pressure. So there comes a day when you stop waiting for them to finally see your worth, and you start walking like you already know it. That's not pride. That's healing. That's not arrogance. That's finally understanding who you are in God. You can't keep pressing pause on your purpose just to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You can't keep begging someone to honor what they once had every chance to cherish. Eventually, the calls go unanswered. The waiting stops, the tears dry, and with a heart full of peace, you lift your eyes and whisper, Lord, I trust you with what's behind me. I'm ready for what's ahead. No, it's not easy, but it's holy. And after all the heartache, after every silent goodbye and unanswered question, here's what you must know. It does hurt to release the ones you once wept over in prayer. It stings to let go of someone you imagined standing beside you forever. But not everyone is meant to go the distance. Not every soul you encounter is tied to your destiny. Some people were only assigned for a chapter, not the whole story. And when their time is up, clinging to them won't extend the page. It only delays your arrival at what God has been preparing for you. Obedience sometimes feels like loss. It can look like loneliness. It can sound like silence. But it's still obedience. And that is where your strength is forged. The enemy, meanwhile, would love for you to stay stuck in the reruns of memory, stuck in the pain of what if and maybe one day. He wants you replaying the silence, dissecting the absence, reading too much into the text that never came. Because if he can keep your eyes locked on the past, he knows you'll miss what's unfolding right in front of you. But God is calling you higher, and higher places require lighter loads. You can't climb while carrying what's already collapsed. You can't rise while tethered to those who choose to stay grounded. Letting go isn't simply walking away. It's choosing to make space, space for peace that stays, space for love that heals, space for people who are sent, not people who slipped in. You gave them your best. You gave them grace. You gave them loyalty. You gave them you. And in return they gave you silence, confusion, and wounds you never deserved. So now, love looks different. Now love looks like closing the door. Not out of bitterness, but out of kindness to yourself. It's not weakness to walk away from chaos. It's wisdom. It's not unforgiveness to protect your peace. It's spiritual discernment. You cannot continue healing in the same place that kept reopening your wounds. You cannot flourish in soil that tried to bury your light. And you cannot keep sending invitations to those who only show up to rob you of joy. God is not asking you to prove your worth to the blind. He's not asking you to chase what chose to walk away. He's asking for your heart, open, surrendered, trusting. That's what he needs. Not another apology accepted, not another toxic door reopened. And hear this. Just because they let you go doesn't mean you weren't enough. Just because they walked away doesn't mean you were unworthy. Their absence never defined your value. Their betrayal never cancelled your calling. You are still chosen, still anointed, still appointed, still destined for greatness. Letting go isn't the end, it's the beginning. It's when you stop surviving and start living. It's the moment you stop proving and start becoming. It's the hour when you say, I will no longer accept crumbs when I was made for a feast. I will no longer beg for love that leaves me empty. I will no longer rent space in my soul to people who only came to tear it down. You rise, maybe limping, maybe scarred, but you rise free, because when God heals you, he doesn't just stitch up the wounds. He gives you a new heart, a new strength, a new joy that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. And when he restores, he doesn't just give back what was lost. He gives more than you dreamed, more than you thought you deserved. More than you knew to ask for. So let the door remain closed. Let the silence speak for itself. Let the past stay buried. And whatever you do, don't reopen what God has already shut. The right people won't need convincing. The ones God sends won't leave you wondering. And the life he's preparing won't require you to drag along those who tried to destroy. So breathe deep, lift your head, step forward, let go, and walk in freedom.